Bowie. What's going on, YouTube? It's Donnie all day. Today, we're talking buoys. We're talking my heart. My heart. Oh, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Bowie knives. And what I want to do is I want to go over some of the classic and most famous shapes and styles of Bowie knives and why you might just want one. Why a Bowie knife could be right up your alley. So now you have a few different kinds of buoys. Originally, the Bowie knife was kind of more like a chef's knife, right? It looked like a large kitchen knife. It wasn't all clip pointed. Sometimes they had a modified clip for penetrating hide and things like that. But for the most part, it looked a lot like a kitchen knife. And then all of a sudden things started to change. And at one point, the knife that I just showed you, which is very well documented or received as the Muso buoy, and called such because there was a guy whose last name was Muso who is said to have possibly designed the first one. But then, I mean, there's three other people. There's Resin and Muso, and there's another guy who are credited with possibly being the designer of this knife. It doesn't really matter. Whoever designed it just nailed it. This one from this area to this area, including the guard shape and spacing, is pretty much exact to the original. So what you're looking at there is what you would have seen from this point, minus the coloring. They had a dirty stainless blade with brass here and brass here. Theirs obviously wasn't full tank construction, but it was just a nasty, nasty piece of knife. And just like things like the K-bar, that's not a K-bar obviously, and the Western style buoy, they have just been copied over and over and over again because it's worth copying. This one obviously is my version, and it is my favorite knife ever. The Muso buoy for me has always spoken to me. Getting to see it in Texas in a museum, up close, after hours on a private tour, and taking photos so I can design this, meant the world to me. So let's get into the Muso buoy now. This was a knife built for fighting. It was built for hand-to-hand combat. Now, Jim Bowie had the famous sandbar knife, sandbar knife fight, where he was shot a couple times. He was stabbed with a sword cane, and it was multiple attackers against him, and all he had was his buoy that he fought and survived with. It was not this knife. He carried one that looked more like the kitchen knife, but he fought them all. He got stabbed, shot, bled, and won. He won. He was just a ridiculously awesome knife fighter. So then they say, oh, so this must be the one that he brought to the Alamo. No, he had a different knife at the Alamo. As a matter of fact, he carried this knife right before, up until he went to the Alamo, where he was in, I don't know if he was in South Carolina or somewhere in there. They had a big meeting with the higher ups where he was given his position in promised land for defending the Alamo, which he ended up dying at anyway, so it didn't really matter. And before leaving that meeting, he gifted his Muso buoy to a friend. And that's why he did not have this knife at the Alamo. It is a big misconception. Oh, this was his knife fight knife. This was his Alamo knife. No, it wasn't. But he did carry the Muso buoy. He carried it often, and he used it. I'm not sure for what, but he definitely used his knife. And what he would have used this for is fighting. This would have been a large combat blade. He would have used the brass spine to collect an enemy's edge and to reduce wear on his own body, because it's a soft metal. This is steel, obviously. The brass is a soft metal, so it would take away vibration a lot. And that's what he did. That's what he used this for. This was a fighting knife. Now, could he use it to chop up some wood for fires, shelters, things like that? Absolutely. But to be quite honest with you, this thing is a fighting knife. This isn't your buoy that you're taking into the woods to camp with. This is your defense knife. So you might take it into the woods against bear attack or cougars or even wild boar or people. You know what I mean? Especially back then, that's what they had to worry about. So this knife was carried and designed for one thing, to keep the carrier alive. And that's why we have that style of knife, which I abso-freaking-lutely love. So the next big popular Bowie knife was the Western style, the Texas style. There was a couple different Texas style buoys. This one they called the Old West buoy. It popularized itself in Texas. And this one is the most copied buoy pattern of all time. This is freaking amazing. So unlike the Muso, where you have the Old West buoy, this thing was not just made for fighting, which it is a devastating fighting blade, but this was going to be your all-around camp usage knife. This was going to do everything from skinning the animal to building your shelter to getting your fire going to defending yourself against bad guys. This is the one-all, do-all Bowie knife. This was literally it. This is the one that was going to carry you from coast to coast, get you there alive, get you there fed, warm, and sheltered. It is the knife of knives, and my second all-time favorite design next to there. And that's not just out of buoys, that's out of all knives, every knife ever made. This is my first and second favorite all-time knife designs are right here. They're made to be exactly what they are, and they are exactly what they're made to be. They are just phenomenal. Any job that I need to get done, I know I can do with this knife. I can do with this knife up, down, all around, front to back. It is just a phenomenal knife. So that's that one. Then as the world starts evolving, we get into smaller Bowie knives. And I know this isn't tiny, but it's smaller. And what happens is the knife shape changes. Now all of a sudden it's less flamboyant, it's more straight, and you're gonna find a jillion variations of a knife like this. You're gonna see some with forward collecting guards, and you're gonna see coffin handles and all kinds of different goofy stuff, little D guards, and you're gonna find maybe the clip point will start back here and be a little deeper, but it's all gonna be a variation of this knife. This knife really popularized itself in the late 1800s, as did this. This was more it popularized more mid 1800s, even though there are copies of these knives similar to this all the way back to the 1500s. But in America, they really started in the early 1800s and weren't popularized until the mid 1800s. This guy right here, turn of the century, this was the knife for cowboys and wranglers and travelers. This was the one that they were going to be. This is their ultimate. This knife. The difference is this one's not going to be as as camp ready. So as far as like going and collecting your wood and building shelters, this would have been the knife where the guys would have on their wagons, they'd have some axes and things like that, and some saws. So they wouldn't really use this for that. This was more of a meal prep knife and a last defense knife, right? Where instead of having only a knife and possibly some kind of black powder gun that is going to take a while to reload, where you needed something a little bigger, a little more ready to defend yourself, especially like even with the D Guard in the Civil War. This one, I already know that I've got 7 rounds in my Winchester, right? I've got 6 rounds in my Colt. I know I can reload fast and be ready. So this was last ditch effort fighting knife. But all buoys are fighting knives first. And that's what's going to get me into the last style that I'm going to show you. And it's probably the most common today. So this style of knife is probably second, maybe most copied knife ever, next to the Old West Bowie. And this is copied from the K-bar, which was an early 1900s knife. The Bowie changed. They made it thin. They made it the ability to carry it anywhere. They gave some of them pommels and different things, and they made them utility knives. And that's exactly what they were for. They were carried into war on a guy's side so he can open cans, he can cut detonation cord, he can dig holes, he can do everything he needs to do with a knife. Was it a fighting knife? No. But was it used to defend them people? Yeah. Now, more people were killed with e-tools, with shovels, in World War I and World War II than they were with the K-bar knife, which this is not a K-bar. There's one down there. But this is my version of what a K-bar should be to make it more of a devastating fighting knife. But it was used, this style of knife was used specifically, organically, and readily for utility purposes. Remember, back in the day, they didn't have the MREs. So when you wanted to open your rations, you needed a can opener. A lot of times you're not going to carry anything small that you're going to lose, even though they had little packs where you can have all kinds of little stuff, but stuff got lost all the time in combat. So having a knife on the belt, you'd pull this up and you'd bop, 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 and you could rip open the lid of a tin can with these. Another thing they're good for, eventually, they used them for fuselage cutting. If a plane goes down or a helicopter goes down and you're in it and you're trapped, the material on the outside of a plane and helicopter is very, very light and thin, so they would use their knife to cut through. And that's what these knives were originally designed for. Everybody who repurposes the design does so for different reasons and different purposes. Some are strictly just more tactical, and some are going to be where it's more fighting on top of utility rather than utility on top of fighting. So there's different purposes for this same exact style of knife, stretching all the way from World War II, I think, is when they started. But this design is just reinvented the Bowie, brought it into the modern age, and now every version of a smaller Bowie knife that you see, you can pretty much thank or give thanks to K-bar for recreating the Bowie knife and making it a more efficient carryable knife. And that's why this knife is so popular and is used and copied so much. The design, while K-bar didn't create the design, it was a hunting knife design that they reused. They brought it into a different light. They made it from just take it out deer hunting to take it out anywhere, do anything. And that's why K-bar gets such great credit and well-deserved credit for bringing us the newer style of Bowie. So that is how Bowie knives have integrated themselves throughout history in the States. Because, you know, even though it's not true Bowie knives pre 1800s, there was the blade shapes themselves have been copied for thousands of years. Since the beginning of knives, pretty much almost every blade shape has been done. And that's where we're going to get into this last one, a different take on a classic Bowie. This was the Crocodile Dundee knife. Obviously, it's a little different. I modified it, but this blade shape opened up a completely different style of Bowie, made itself famous in Hollywood, and just opened itself up once people saw it from the movie Crocodile Dundee. The low hanging belly across the flat spine, it had a guard in the front and a brass guard in the rear. Uh, People just knew immediately that this is something they had to have, and the reason is because they took an old style buoy and they reinvented it, and that's literally what this is a reinvented version of this. And you look at it and you'd say they're nothing alike, but in all actuality they are. It's a low hanging belly on a flat spine, brass guards. It's just a big, dangerous, badass do all knife. And so we literally can thank Hollywood for popularizing this blade shape. I'd like to say the blade shape was thought of in Australia. I have no idea where it really came from. But whoever created this blade shape originally, man, they did a great job. It's just such a great piece to have along with something like this. Just another accent piece. It's a different way to swing one of these, and it couldn't have been done better. Well, I mean, it could have. It could have been done the way I did it. Oh wait, it's right here. As a matter of fact, it's right here. So, like a lot of knives are copied. That Crocodile Dundee knife, copied. My version needed to be a little thicker, a little bigger, and true full tang. But you can see what came out of it. I obviously modified the clip area because I wanted a knife like this, but I didn't want it too thin here. I wanted it full tang, but I wanted to give it more of an original style Bowie clip, and that's how I modified that one. Was a kind of a cross between the Wild West and the Crocodile Bowie, and that's how I got my gator tail. So buoys. In today's modern world, it's less of a fighting knife because people just aren't there out in the plains, having knife fights. But they are still very, very widely used among campers and cowboys and people who are trekking across the globe and need things like fires and food and survival and shelter. The Bowie knife is still undoubtedly the best option to have when it comes to just all-around one-tool camp knife. You can bring an axe with you. You can bring all kinds of different stuff, but if you are out there as a minimalist and you are belting things and maybe you're hiking, you want the less is more type of situation. Less is more. You carry one knife that does everything, and nothing is going to take you as far and do more than a Bowie knife. So that's it for this one. Gosh, love this damn knife. That's it for this one. I am Donnie B all day. Until next video.